I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts. I mean, I've read my fair share of them. Cheating spouses, messy divorces, all that drama. But I always thought my life was solid. I had a great career, a beautiful wife, and a future that looked like something out of a success story. Turns out, I was just another fool living in a bubble. For context, I'm Brandon, 38. I'm an IVF specialist and a biotech entrepreneur. I built my career from the ground up, helped countless couples start families, and made a name for myself in the medical field. I thought my wife, Amber, 35, was my biggest supporter. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5. She always played the role of the loving wife, but in hindsight, there were cracks I ignored, little things that didn't seem like much at the time but now feel like flashing neon signs. The gut punch came on an ordinary Tuesday. I had a packed day at the clinic and came home later than usual. Amber was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up when I walked in. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed her screen reflected in the window behind her. She was smiling at a text. A long one. My curiosity got the best of me, so I casually asked, "Who's got you grinning like that?" Her reaction? Instant panic. She locked her phone and laughed it off. "Oh, just some work stuff. Curtis is being an idiot again." Curtis. A name I had heard too often lately. Curtis, her coworker. The funny guy from her marketing team. I never thought much of him, just some dude she worked with. But in that moment, something felt off. The way she tensed up, the forced laugh. A little voice in my head whispered, "Check the phone." I didn't, not yet. But the seed was planted. That night, Amber went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I stayed up, sitting in the dim light of my home office, replaying every odd moment from the past few months. The sudden late meetings, the new perfume she never wore around me, the way she'd leave the room to take calls. It all started adding up. I needed proof. The next morning, while Amber was in the shower, I took her phone. I knew her password, it hadn't changed in years. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. And there it was. Curtis. A pinned conversation. Heart emojis. My heart pounded as I scrolled. The texts weren't just friendly. They were flirtatious, intimate, filled with inside jokes I wasn't part of. Then I found a photo. Not explicit, but enough, her in a dress I had never seen before, captioned, "Wish you could have seen me in this last night." I felt sick. But I didn't explode. Not yet. I took screenshots, forwarded them to myself, then deleted the sent messages. If this was happening, I wasn't going to be some clueless husband begging for answers. I was going to be strategic. I put her phone back, pretending nothing had changed. But in my head, I was already planning my next move. Amber had no idea her world was about to collapse. After that morning, I knew I couldn't just confront Amber and hope for the truth. I had a feeling she'd gaslight me, lie, cry, twist the story to make me doubt what I saw. I wasn't about to let that happen. I needed undeniable proof. That day at work, I barely focused. My hands moved through the motions of consultations and lab work, but my mind was elsewhere, on Amber, on Curtis, on the way my marriage was crumbling right in front of me. Every time I thought about those messages, my stomach twisted. But anger kept me steady. I wasn't going to be some fool begging for explanations. So I did what any man in my position should do. I hired a private investigator. A buddy of mine from college, Jake, had gone into the security business after dropping out of med school. I hadn't talked to him in years, but when I reached out and told him the basics, he just said, "Give me a week." In the meantime, I played my role, the perfect, oblivious husband. I still kissed Amber goodbye in the mornings. Still sent her, "Hope your day's good" texts. Still listened to her ramble about work and how annoying Curtis could be. But now, every word out of her mouth felt like a lie. Every time she smiled at me, I wondered if she was thinking about him. I started noticing things I had ignored before. She took longer to get ready on days she had meetings. She never left her phone unattended anymore. When we sat on the couch together, she'd tilt her screen away from me. One night, about 4 days after I found the messages, Amber said she had a work dinner. The way she said it, so casual, like I was a fool who wouldn't suspect a thing, made my blood boil. I just smiled and said, "Have fun." As soon as she left, I tailed her. "I'm not a private investigator. I don't have spy skills. But I had rage and Google Maps. She thought she was being slick by setting the dinner at some fancy steakhouse in the city, the kind of place where work people actually meet. But instead of parking, she walked right past the entrance and into a hotel across the street. I almost lost it right there. Instead, I parked a few spots away, grabbed my phone, and snapped a few photos of her walking in. Then I waited. 30 minutes later, Curtis showed up. I took more photos. My heart was pounding, but I stayed put. A part of me still hoped I was wrong. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she was meeting him to discuss some big project. But then, they stepped into the elevator together. That was it. I didn't follow them upstairs. I didn't need to. I had everything I needed. I drove home in silence. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was fact. Amber was cheating. Curtis was the other man. And I was done playing the fool. By the time I got home, my head was clear. I wasn't going to confront Amber yet. That would give her a chance to lie, to manipulate, to cry her way out of it. No, I wanted to watch her dig her own grave. That night, she came home late, smelling like expensive hotel soap. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to be half asleep. She walked in, kissed me on the forehead like she wasn't out screwing another man, and said, "Work was exhausting. I'm gonna shower and pass out." I just smiled. Sounds good, babe. Let her think she was winning. The next morning, Jake sent me an update. It was worse than I thought. Curtis wasn't just some fling. They'd been seeing each other for months. Lunchtime meetups at hotels. Late-night work meetings. Even a weekend trip when I thought Amber was visiting her sister. I felt like an idiot. But anger kept me grounded. I told Jake to keep going, to get me every shred of evidence possible. At the same time, I started moving in silence. I met with my lawyer. No way was I letting Amber get a single cent more than she deserved. I got all our financials in order, locked down my accounts, and made sure I had the upper hand in the divorce. I gathered proof. Every text, every call log, every suspicious charge on our credit card, screenshotted, printed, stored in a folder she'd never find. I acted normal. If she had any idea I knew, she'd try to cover her tracks. So I played the doting husband, making breakfast, kissing her goodbye, telling her I loved her. Let her think she was untouchable. But the best part? I set up a little surprise. A week later, I told Amber I had a conference out of town. 3 days in Chicago. Won't be back until Sunday night. She barely reacted. Just nodded and said, "That's great. You need a break." She was already planning to meet Curtis. I could see it in her eyes. So I packed a bag, kissed her goodbye, and left. In reality, I drove a few blocks away, parked, and waited. It took 2 hours. Then, like clockwork, Curtis's car pulled up in front of my house. Amber practically ran outside to meet him. She didn't hesitate, didn't check if the coast was clear, just jumped into his arms like some love-struck teenager. I snapped the photos. Then I followed them. They went straight to a hotel, same one as last time. This time, I walked inside, went up to the front desk and, using the same charm I use with clients at my clinic, got the receptionist to confirm they had just checked in. That was it. I had everything. Tonight was the night I ended this. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to destroy them. After confirming they had checked in, I called Jake. "It's happening. Meet me at the hotel." Jake had already arranged for a camera to be set up in the hallway near their room. Legally, I couldn't record inside without their consent, but I didn't need to. The hallway footage, the entrance footage, the time-stamped records, all of it was enough to bury Amber in court. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and walked up to their room. Room 314. I knocked. Silence. Then footsteps. A pause. Amber's voice. "Who is it?" I smiled. "Showtime. It's your husband." Open the door. Nothing. Dead silence. Then, chaos. Muffled voices. Rustling. The sound of someone scrambling. I could picture it perfectly. Amber panicking, Curtis trying to find his clothes, both of them realizing their little fantasy world was crashing down. I knocked again, harder. "Amber. I know you're in there." Open the door, or I'll have hotel security do it for you. More scrambling. Whispering. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, the door cracked open. Amber peeked out, her face pale. She was wrapped in the hotel's white robe, her hair damp. Behind her, I could see Curtis half-dressed, frozen like a deer in headlights. I pulled out my phone, clicked record, and smiled. Say hi to the camera, sweetheart. Her face drained of all color. Brandon, please. I didn't let her finish. Save it. I've got everything. The texts, the hotel records, the photos, and now? Video proof. Hope Curtis was worth it. Curtis, the spineless coward, finally spoke. Dude, I swear it's not what it looks like. I actually laughed. Oh really? So you didn't just check into this room, with my wife, after sneaking around for months? His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Amber broke down. Brandon, please, let's just talk. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. Like this? I took a deep breath, pocketed my phone, and gave her the coldest look I could muster. We're done. I'll send the divorce papers to your email. Hope Curtis has a spare bedroom, because you won't be staying in my house. She gasped. Brandon, don't do this. We can fix this. I love you. I shook my head. No, you love sneaking around. You love lying. But me? You lost me the moment you made your choice. And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That night, I packed up all of Amber's things, put them in suitcases, and left them on the porch. I changed the locks, blocked her number, unfollowed her on everything. She tried to call. She tried to text. She even showed up at the house at 2 a.m., banging on the door, crying. I didn't open it. The next morning, I sent the divorce papers. No negotiations. No discussions. She gets what the prenup allows, nothing more. Amber tried everything. Denial, it was just a mistake. I was confused. Blame shifting, you were always so busy with work. I felt neglected. Begging, please, we can fix this. I don't want to lose you. Too late. I was already gone. By the end of the week, I was officially done with Amber. But my story? It was just getting started. Because what I didn't know yet was that leaving Amber would lead me to a whole new fight. A new town. A new woman. A new war. Amber didn't go down quietly. After I served her divorce papers, she turned into a full-blown disaster. She blew up my phone, left long, dramatic voicemails, and even showed up at my clinic crying in the parking lot like we were in some bad soap opera. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she got caught. I ignored her, but she didn't stop. Then came the smear campaign. She told our mutual friends that I was cold, that I emotionally abandoned her, and that's why she made a mistake. Curtis, that coward, went along with it, probably hoping to salvage what was left of his dignity. Didn't matter. I had receipts. I sent a few screenshots to the right people. Game over. By the time the divorce was finalized, Amber had lost everything. The house? Mine. Her cushy lifestyle? Gone. Her reputation? In shambles. She tried to fight for alimony, but the prenup shut that down fast. The last time I saw her, she was standing outside the courthouse, looking at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like she realized, too late, that I wasn't the man who'd put up with her games. And honestly, I felt nothing. No rage. No sadness. Just relief. I was free. But then came the emptiness. For weeks, I felt like I was floating through life. Work was fine, but my heart wasn't in it. My house felt like a museum of a life that didn't exist anymore. Everywhere I looked, I saw ghosts of what should have been. I needed a fresh start. That's how I ended up in Oakfield. A small town, far away from the city, quiet enough to clear my head. I found a cozy rental, set up a satellite clinic, and tried to start over. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I wasn't looking for anything at all. But then I met Linda. And suddenly, my life got a whole lot more complicated. Oakfield was the kind of town where people still waved at strangers. Quiet streets, mom-and-pop shops, a local diner straight out of the 1950s. Exactly the kind of place I needed to reset my life. I wasn't planning on meeting anyone. But then I walked into Maggie's diner. It was one of those places where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and the waitresses knew everyone by name. Except me. I was just another outsider passing through. And then there was Linda. She was pouring coffee when I first saw her. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Brown hair tied up in a loose ponytail, tired eyes, and a polite but forced smile she gave every customer. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't trying to get attention. But something about her felt familiar. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her eyes. The way she moved like she was carrying a weight no one else could see. I knew that feeling. She came to my table, notepad in hand. "What can I get you?" I almost said coffee, but something made me ask, "What's good here?" She hesitated. Like she wasn't used to anyone actually caring what she thought. Then she sighed. "Depends. You in the mood for real food, or just something to fill your stomach?" I smirked. Real food. Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but didn't quite get there. "Get the pot roast." So I did. And it was the best damn meal I'd had in weeks. I started coming back to Maggie's more often. Not because of the food, though it was good, but because something about Linda kept pulling me in. She was friendly with customers but guarded. Always checking over her shoulder. Always careful with her words. One night, when the diner was nearly empty, I caught her rubbing her wrist absent-mindedly. Like it hurt. And then I saw the bruise. Dark. Fading but still there. Something twisted in my gut. I knew that kind of bruise. I had seen it before, on patients, on friends. On women who weren't safe. But I didn't push. Not yet. Instead I asked, "Linda, are you okay?" She flinched. Just barely. Then she forced that same tired smile. "Yeah. Just clumsy." I didn't believe her. But I let it go. For now. I couldn't stop thinking about that bruise. It wasn't just a random injury. It was a grip mark. The kind you get when someone grabs your wrist too hard. I told myself to let it go. Not my business. But every time I saw Linda at the diner, something about her felt off. One night, the place was almost empty when I walked in. Linda was wiping down a table, looking more exhausted than usual. I slid into my usual booth, and when she came over, I kept my voice low. "Linda, be honest with me. Are you safe?" She froze. For a split second, I saw fear flash in her eyes. Then, just as fast, she masked it. Forced a chuckle. "Brandon, I don't know what you think. I think someone's hurting you." She went rigid. Her fingers tightened around her notepad. I could practically hear her heartbeat speeding up. Then, she exhaled sharply, looking around the diner like someone might be listening. And that's when I knew. Something was very, very wrong. She didn't deny it. Didn't argue. Instead, she muttered, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." And walked away. That should have been the end of it. But the next day, things escalated. I was walking back to my truck after grabbing groceries when I saw her. Linda. Not in her waitress uniform, not in the diner, but outside a rundown bar on the edge of town. And she wasn't alone. Two guys stood with her. Big, mean-looking. One of them was talking close to her face. Too close. I slowed my pace, watching. Linda's body language screamed discomfort. She was trying to step back, but the guy grabbed her arm. The same damn arm I saw bruised. I saw red. Before I even thought about it, I was moving. By the time I got close, I could hear them. "You know what happens if you don't pay, Linda." The guy's voice was low, threatening. Her voice was tight. "I just need more time." More time? Pay? What the hell was going on? I stepped in. "Hey. Let her go." All three of them turned. The guy holding Linda sized me up. Smirked. "This isn't your business, city boy." I held my ground. "It is now." For a second, I thought he'd take a swing. Instead, he gave Linda's arm one last squeeze before shoving her away. "You just bought her more problems." Then they walked off, leaving Linda standing there, breathing fast, not meeting my eyes. I didn't say anything. Just waited. Finally, she whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." I crossed my arms. "Who were they?" She let out a hollow laugh. "You really want to know?" Then she looked up, and for the first time, I saw it, pure desperation. They own me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Linda wasn't just in trouble. She was trapped. And I wasn't about to walk away. Linda didn't say much after that. Just shook her head, muttered a shaky "thank you," and walked off like she hadn't just dropped a bombshell in my lap. But I couldn't let it go. Those guys, whoever they were, owned her. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept running through the details. The bruises. The fear in her eyes. The way she said she needed more time. I had seen this before. Debt traps. People get desperate, take a loan from the wrong hands, and suddenly they owe more than they can ever pay back. And guys like the ones I saw, they didn't just send polite reminders. The next morning, I waited until Linda's shift at Maggie's was over. When she walked outside, I was leaning against my truck. She sighed the moment she saw me. "Brandon, don't." I ignored that. "Get in. We're talking." She hesitated. Then, after a long moment, she climbed into the passenger seat. I pulled out of the lot, driving aimlessly, waiting for her to say something. Finally, she did. It started 5 years ago. I glanced at her. She was staring out the window, voice hollow. My ex left me in a hole. Ran up my credit cards, drained our savings, skipped town. I was drowning in bills. Couldn't pay rent, couldn't even keep the lights on. Then, she let out a bitter laugh. Someone made me an offer. I didn't interrupt. A guy named Ray. Said he could help. Loaned me $5,000, no questions asked. I already knew where this was going. But the interest, it never stopped. Every time I got close to paying it off, the number changed. Fees. Penalties. Bull, she caught herself, exhaled. It never ends. They kept her trapped. Linda finally looked at me. I owe them $15,000 now. I work 2 jobs, I scrape by, and it still isn't enough. Every month, they come knocking. $15,000. To me, it wasn't a huge amount. But to Linda? It was a life sentence. I gripped the steering wheel. And what happens if you don't pay? She swallowed hard. They make my life hell. Threats. Showing up at my job. One time they put a brick through my window. My jaw clenched. These guys weren't just some scummy loan sharks. They were dangerous. I pulled over in a quiet part of town, turned to her. "Why haven't you gone to the police?" She let out a humorless laugh. "You think they don't have cops in their pocket?" I go to the police, and suddenly my car mysteriously catches fire, or I get a visit in the middle of the night. I believed her. In small towns like this, power runs deep in all the wrong places. "Linda," I said carefully, "what if I could help?" She blinked. "Help?" "I have money." The words came out easy. "I could pay them off. Get them off your back." She shook her head fast. "No. No way. If they think someone's stepping in, they'll just find another way to control me. It's not just about the money. It's power." And I understood. She didn't just need a check. She needed them gone. For good. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling. This wasn't just about Linda anymore. I wasn't about to sit back and let these guys ruin her life. I'd been betrayed. Humiliated. Broken. But this? This was something I could fight for. I pulled out my phone. "I know someone who can help." Linda stared at me. "Brandon, what are you doing?" I met her eyes. Ending this. I wasn't stupid. These weren't just some pushy debt collectors. They were criminals. And criminals don't just walk away because you ask nicely. I needed backup. So I made a call. Jake. The same guy who helped me take down Amber's affair was about to help me with something a whole lot bigger. Linda sat in my truck, arms crossed, looking equal parts skeptical and terrified. "Who is this guy?" she asked as I pulled into an empty parking lot. "An old friend," I said. "Trust me." She scoffed. "That's a big ask." I didn't blame her. But when Jake's black SUV rolled up, she sat up straighter. The guy had a presence. Jake stepped out, sunglasses on, looking like someone who didn't have time for nonsense. He walked over, glanced at Linda, then back at me. "You got me out here for this?" I nodded. "She's in trouble. And I need to fix it." Jake sighed, rubbing his jaw. All right. Tell me everything. Linda was hesitant at first. But when she saw that Jake wasn't just some random friend, that he actually knew how to handle situations like this, she started talking. Jake listened, nodding, asking the right questions. When she was done, he looked at me. This isn't just some small-town scam. These guys are connected. You sure you want to do this? I didn't hesitate. Yeah. Jake smirked. Then let's take them down. The plan? Get proof. Get the feds involved. End them for good. Linda knew where they operated. A shady bar on the outskirts of town, Ray's place. The same spot where I saw her getting harassed. Jake had contacts in law enforcement. Not the small-town cops that were probably on Ray's payroll, but federal agents who would love to take down a crime ring. But first, we needed evidence. And that meant putting Linda in the most dangerous position of her life. She had to wear a wire. Linda hated the idea. You want me to walk in there, wired, and get them to admit they're running a scam? That's insane. Jake stayed calm, his expression unreadable. It's the only way to get them. We need evidence, recorded threats, proof of their operation. If we get that, the feds can shut them down for good. She scoffed, shaking her head. You don't get it. These guys aren't just loan sharks. They have connections. They know when something's off. She was scared. I could see it in the way she clenched her fists, the way her eyes darted like she was already looking for an escape. I stepped closer. Linda, listen to me. You can't keep living like this. You've been paying them for years, and it's never enough. You know it never will be. This is your chance to break free. She swallowed hard. And if they catch me? Jake didn't hesitate. They won't. You'll be in and out. You're just making your usual payment, same as always. The difference is, this time, we'll be recording. The second we get what we need, we pull you out. Linda let out a shaky breath. She crossed her arms, staring at the ground. I could tell she wanted to refuse. She had spent years surviving by keeping her head down. Now we were asking her to step into the fire. I didn't push. I let the silence settle between us, waiting for her to make the decision. After a long moment, she finally spoke. You don't get it, she muttered. They don't just hurt people. They destroy them. If I do this, I have to disappear. Even if the feds take down Ray, someone else will take his place. Jake nodded, his voice serious. That's why we're going after the whole network. If we do this right, we don't just get Ray, we take down everyone connected to him. Linda looked between us, her expression unreadable. I could see the war inside her. Fear versus anger. She was terrified. But she was also tired. Tired of running. Tired of waiting for things to magically change. Finally, she looked up at me. You promise you'll be right there? I nodded. Every second. She exhaled slowly. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered, Okay. I'll do it. Jake smirked. Good. Let's bring these guys down. The next few days were tense. Jake worked fast, setting up the wire, making sure everything was discreet. He tested it over and over, making sure Linda wouldn't be caught. Meanwhile, I watched her closely. She was quieter than usual, more withdrawn. She was scared. And I didn't blame her. She was about to walk into a room full of criminals who had spent years owning her. If even one of them suspected something was off, she wouldn't be walking out. The night of the sting, we drove to the bar in silence. Linda sat in the passenger seat, fingers twisting in her lap. You don't have to do this, I said softly. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Yes, I do. I wanted to tell her she didn't. That I could find another way. But we both knew the truth. This was the only way to end it. Jake's SUV followed behind us. He had the feds listening in real time. If things went south, they'd be ready. At least, that's what I told myself. When we pulled up, Linda took a deep breath. All right. Let's do this. I hated watching her go inside alone. But I had to trust her. She walked in, back straight, head high, like she wasn't wearing a wire that could get her killed. Jake and I stayed in the car, listening through the feed. A low voice greeted her. Linda. You're late. I recognized the voice. Ray. Linda's voice was steady, but I could hear the edge of fear. I got your money. A pause. Then, good. But we need to talk. Jake shot me a look. This wasn't part of the plan. Inside, I could hear chairs shifting. Footsteps. Then Ray's voice, lower now. Darker. Tell me, Linda. You wouldn't be doing anything stupid, would you? Linda didn't answer right away. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Then she let out a breathless laugh. Stupid? Ray, I've been paying you for 5 years. I'm not stupid. Ray chuckled. That's right. You're not. So you wouldn't mind if I check something, would you? Jake's eyes met mine. Something was very, very wrong. My hands clenched into fists as I listened through the wire. You wouldn't mind if I check something, would you? Ray's voice was smooth, casual, too casual. Inside, Linda hesitated. Just for a second. But I heard it. And so did Ray. What would I need to hide? She shot back, trying to keep her tone steady. Ray chuckled. See, that's the thing. I've been doing this a long time, Linda. I know when someone's nervous. And right now? You're nervous. I looked at Jake. We need to go in. Jake shook his head, keeping his eyes on his laptop where the live feed was running. Not yet. If we blow our cover too soon, we lose everything. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay put. Inside the bar, a chair scraped against the floor. Footsteps moved closer to Linda. Ray's voice was lower now. Threatening. You're acting different. You always keep your head down, pay what you owe, and leave. But tonight? You've got that look. Like you're up to something. Damn it. Linda must have realized she was trapped. I could hear it in her breathing. Then, she did something that nearly stopped my heart. She laughed. Come on, Ray. You think I'd do something stupid? I'm just tired. Working 2 jobs to keep up with this ridiculous debt of mine. That's all. I held my breath. Silence. Then, Ray exhaled sharply. Maybe you're right. But let's be sure. I heard the unmistakable sound of fabric shifting. He was reaching for her. Jake's expression darkened. That son of a... Linda tried to play it off. Ray, what the hell are you doing? Ray's voice was cold. Just making sure you're not wired. I didn't wait for Jake's signal. I threw open the truck door and started moving. Jake cursed under his breath but followed me, talking into his earpiece. We're going in. Get ready to move. The feds had been listening the whole time. They needed a little more, just a little more, before they could move in. But I wasn't waiting. We pushed through the front doors of the bar. The place was dim, smelled like smoke and sweat. A few patrons turned, eyeing us warily. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Ray. He was standing over Linda, his hand gripping her arm, pulling at her sleeve. Linda looked up, her eyes going wide when she saw me. Brandon. Ray turned. His expression went from confusion to realization real fast. Who the hell are you? I forced a smirk, trying to keep my rage in check. Just a concerned friend. Ray's grip on Linda tightened. You shouldn't be here. Jake stepped up beside me, calm as ever. And you shouldn't be extorting innocent people, Ray. But here we are. Ray's eyes narrowed. Then suddenly, he smiled. Oh. I see what's going on. He looked at Linda. You finally found yourself a knight in shining armor, huh? Linda's jaw clenched. Let me go, Ray. Ray sighed dramatically, then loosened his grip. He stepped back, lifting his hands. See? No harm done. Jake's voice was sharp. We know what you've been doing. We've got proof. Ray blinked. Then slowly, he started laughing. Laughing. That set off every alarm in my head. Proof, he repeated, smirking. You mean like a recording? My stomach dropped. Oh no. Ray's eyes flicked to Linda. You really thought I wouldn't notice? Sweetheart, I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. Then, faster than I could react, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife. Now, he said smoothly, how about we have a real conversation? Jake's hand went to his waist, where his gun was. But before he could draw, a voice boomed through the bar. The front doors burst open. Agents flooded inside, guns drawn. Ray's smirk vanished. For the first time, he looked afraid. Everything happened fast. 1 second, Ray was standing there, smirking like he still had control. The next, half a dozen FBI agents stormed the bar, guns raised, shouting orders. Drop the weapon. Ray's cocky expression vanished. His eyes darted around, calculating. He still had the knife in his hand, and for a second, I thought he might be dumb enough to make a move. Jake must have thought the same thing. He took a slow step forward, hand still hovering near his gun. Don't be stupid, Ray. Linda stood frozen, breathing hard, her sleeve still pulled up where Ray had grabbed her. Her eyes flicked between him and the agents, waiting to see what he'd do. Ray wasn't used to losing. For years, he had been the one with the power. The one who made people afraid. And now? Now, he was the one trapped. I saw it in his face, the split-second realization that it was over. With a sharp exhale, he dropped the knife. It clattered onto the dirty bar floor, spinning before coming to a stop. One of the agents moved in immediately, slamming him against a table, cuffing his wrists behind his back. Ray Carter, you're under arrest for extortion, illegal lending practices, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit violent crimes. Ray let out a dry laugh. That's a hell of a list. The agent ignored him, continuing to read his rights as they pulled him to his feet. Meanwhile, the other agents moved through the bar, rounding up Ray's men. Some protested, others tried to slip out the back, but they were surrounded. Linda still hadn't moved. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at Ray like she couldn't believe it was real. I stepped closer, voice low. It's over. She let out a shaky breath. It doesn't feel real. I couldn't blame her. She had spent 5 years under Ray's control. 5 years of threats, of payments that never ended, of looking over her shoulder. And now? He was the one being dragged out in cuffs. Outside, a few bystanders had gathered, watching as Ray and his men were loaded into police cars. The flashing red and blue lights painted the whole street in streaks of color. Ray looked over at Linda one last time. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw fear in his eyes. He knew he was done. The agent slammed the door shut, and the car pulled away, disappearing into the night. Jake let out a breath, shoving his hands in his pockets. Well, that was fun. I shot him a look. You call that fun? He grinned. I like when scumbags get what's coming to them. I didn't disagree. Linda still hadn't said much. She was standing just outside the bar, staring at the empty street like she was expecting someone to jump out and tell her it wasn't real. I walked over. You okay? She let out a hollow laugh. I don't know. I think I forgot what it feels like, to not be afraid. I nodded, understanding more than I cared to admit. She turned to face me, something uncertain in her eyes. Brandon, why did you do all this? You barely know me. I thought about it. About everything that had happened in the past few months. The betrayal. The divorce. The feeling of losing everything I thought mattered. And then I thought about Linda. How I had seen in her the same thing I had felt, the weight of being trapped, of having your life ripped out of your hands. I shrugged. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know what it's like to fight to get it back. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time since I met her, she smiled. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. The next few days felt strange. Like the whole town had shifted overnight. With Ray and his crew behind bars, the fear that had hung over Oakfield for years was gone. People whispered about it everywhere. At the diner, the gas station, the grocery store. Did you hear? They finally got Ray. But Linda? She wasn't celebrating. I found her sitting outside Maggie's diner after her shift, staring at nothing, turning a coffee cup in her hands. She looked lost. I sat down across from her, waiting until she noticed me. You look like someone who just won a fight but doesn't know what to do next. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. That obvious? I nodded. You spent 5 years living under his control. It's not easy to just flip a switch and move on. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I keep expecting someone to show up. Like there's another Ray waiting around the corner. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. When you've lived in survival mode for that long, peace feels unnatural. I leaned forward. You're free now, Linda. She looked at me, like she wanted to believe it. Yeah? And what do free people do? It was a good question. Because the truth was, I didn't know what was next for me either. I came to Oakfield to get away, to start over. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just thinking about myself. Linda was free. But she was also starting from nothing. No debt, but no real future plan either. And maybe I wasn't ready to leave just yet. We figure it out, I said. One step at a time. She studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, she smiled. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The dust had settled, but life didn't just magically snap into place. Linda was free, but freedom came with its own set of problems. She had spent so many years focused on surviving that now, without Ray breathing down her neck, she wasn't sure how to actually live. And as much as I told myself I had come to Oakfield for a temporary escape, I wasn't in a hurry to leave. A week after Ray's arrest, I walked into Maggie's diner late at night, just before closing. Linda was behind the counter, wiping it down, her apron tossed on the stool beside her. She looked better. Less tired, like she was finally getting real sleep. But there was still that quiet uncertainty in her eyes. She smirked when she saw me. You again? Don't you have anything better to do? I shrugged. Not really. She rolled her eyes but slid a fresh cup of coffee toward me anyway. I took a sip. So what's next for you? Linda sighed, leaning against the counter. I don't know. I've been stuck in survival mode for so long, I never thought about what I actually want. She hesitated. I've been saving though. Before Ray, before all of it, I always wanted to open a bakery. Nothing fancy. Just a little place with fresh bread, good coffee, maybe some homemade pies. I blinked, surprised. You bake? She grinned. Yeah, believe it or not. My grandma taught me when I was a kid. It's the only thing I ever really loved doing. I thought about it for a second. Then do it. She scoffed. It's not that simple, Brandon. I don't have the money. A place like that takes. I have money. Linda's eyes snapped to mine, instantly suspicious. No way. I'm not taking your money. I chuckled. Who said I was offering it? I'm talking about an investment. A business partner. Her mouth opened, then closed. You want to open a bakery? I shrugged. Why not? I built a business before. I can do it again. She stared at me, trying to read me, trying to figure out if I was serious. Why would you do that? She asked, softer this time. I didn't have an easy answer. Maybe it was because I saw something in her. A survivor, just like me. Someone who had been knocked down but still stood back up. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a reason to stay. Because I believe in you, I said simply. She exhaled, shaking her head, but I caught the way her lips curved into a smile. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Oakfield wasn't just some town I ran to after my life collapsed. It was where I rebuilt. Where I met someone who reminded me that the world wasn't just betrayal and loss. Where I found a new purpose. Amber had tried to break me. Curtis had thought he could humiliate me. But they were in the past. This was my future. And I wasn't looking back.